The actors of Shakespeare's time performed plays in a great variety of locations. They played at court, that is, in the great halls of such royal residences as Whitehall, Hampton Court, and Greenwich. They played in halls at the University of Oxford and Cambridge and at the Inns of Court, the residences in London of the legal societies, and they also played in the private houses of great lords and civic officials. Sometimes acting companies went on tour from London into the provinces often, but not only, when outbreaks of bubonic plague in the capital forced the closing of theaters to reduce the possibility of contagion in crowded audiences. In the provinces, the actors usually staged their plays in churches until around 1600 or in guild halls, while surviving records show only a handful of occasions when actors played at inns while on tour. London inns were important playing places up until the 1590s. The building of theaters in London had begun only shortly before Shakespeare wrote his first plays in the 1590s. These theaters were of two kinds: outdoor or public playhouses that could accommodate large numbers of playgoers, and indoor private theaters for much smaller audiences. What is usually regarded as the first London outdoor public playhouse was called simply the theatre. James Burbage, the father of Richard Burbage, who was perhaps the most famous actor in Shakespeare's company, built it in 1576 in an area north of the city of London called Shoreditch. Among the more famous of the other public playhouses that capitalized on the new fashion were the Curtain and the Fortune, both also built north of the city, the Rose, the Swan, the Globe, and the Hope, all located on the Bankside, a region just across the Thames south of the city of London. All these playhouses had to be built outside the jurisdiction of the City of London because many civic officials were hostile to the performance of drama and repeatedly petitioned the Royal Council to abolish it. The theatres erected on the Bankside, a region under the authority of the Church of England, whose head was the monarch, shared the neighbourhood with houses of prostitution and with the Paris Garden, where the blood reports of bear baiting and bull baiting were carried on. There may have been no clear distinction between playhouses and buildings for such sports, for the Hope was used for both plays and baiting, and Philip Henslow, owner of the Rose and later partner in the ownership of the Fortune, was also a partner in a monopoly on baiting. All these forms of entertainment were easily accessible to Londoners by boat across the Thames or over London Bridge. Evidently, Shakespeare's company prospered on the Bankside. They moved there in 1599, threatened by difficulties in renewing the lease on the land where their first playhouse, the theatre, had been built. Shakespeare's company took advantage of the Christmas holiday in 1598 to dismantle the theatre and transport its timbers across the Thames to the Bankside, where in 1599 these timbers were used in the building of the Globe. The weather in late December 1598 is recorded as having been especially harsh. It was so cold that the Thames was nearly frozen, and there was heavy snow. Perhaps the weather aided Shakespeare's company in eluding their landlord. The snow hiding their activity and the freezing of the Thames allowed them to slide the timbers across to the Bankside without paying tolls for repeated trips over London Bridge. Attractive as this narrative is, it remains just as likely that the heavy snow hampered transport of the timbers in wagons through the London streets to the river. It also must be remembered that the Thames was, according to report, only nigh frozen, and therefore as impassable as it ever was. Whatever the precise circumstances of this fascinating event in English theatre history, Shakespeare's company was able to begin playing at their new Globe Theatre on the Bankside in 1599. After the first globe burned down in 1613 during the staging of Shakespeare's Henry VIII, its thatch roof was set alight by cannon fire called for by the performance. Shakespeare's company immediately rebuilt on the same location. The second globe seems to have been a grander structure than its predecessor. It remained in use until the beginning of the English Civil War in 1642, when Parliament officially closed the theatres. Soon thereafter, it was pulled down.